Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle. Today we're talking about how do you triumph over a dark night of the soul? And I have three answers. But first, let's define what a dark night of the soul is. I am your host, Dr. Monica Ogando, and this is Spiritual Matters Thursdays. So perhaps we could argue that we are collectively going through a dark night of the soul, particularly in America, but certainly all over the world. There are times of uncertainty, times of transition, times of reckoning with who do you say that you are? What are you made of, right? And so a lot of times life just demands that you answer that. One of the biblical stories that highlights this point is when Jesus asks Peter, who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Son of the living God. Peter, in a metaphysical perspective, represents the faculty of faith, and Jesus represents the Christ consciousness. And so the Christ consciousness is always asking the faith faculty, who do you say that I am? And when you respond from faith, when you respond from divine law, you know that your Christ consciousness is the spirit of the living God, is the light of the living God. And so I don't know if you know this, but light is born in the darkness. So you would know that the sun has risen unless you just got through the night. And a lot of times we have it like darkness or void or absence of light is somehow quote unquote evil, somehow quote unquote bad or wrong, or it's a negative time. And I'm going to say that it's negative in the way that like photography film is negative, right? It's supposed to show you the contrast. It's supposed to show you what's hidden, because the contrast in itself is a teaching tool. And so the reason I say that I have three answers for how do you go through a dark night of the soul depends on where you are in the journey. If you haven't gotten through one yet, the way to get through a dark night of the soul is to drop the resistance, because it's coming. Okay, that's why grandmas and the elders always do. When you thought that you had the answer because you're young and you know it all, they used to say, keep on living. And so you just have to keep on walking. You'll get yours soon enough. Ain't no thing, everybody gets at least one in their lifetime. And sometimes you get the same one because you didn't learn the lesson the first time. So, there's no such thing as compulsory graduation. You're gonna get this until you get this. Okay? You gotta get it first. You can't go to the next one until you get this one. So so the first step is to drop the resistance. Like and not accept, like resign, like woe is me, this is just my lot in life. I don't mean resignation. I mean acceptance. I mean, like, get real with what it is that's happening. Don't make it worse than what it is, and don't be Pollyanna and try to make it better than what it is in an effort to be, love and light. Because sometimes love and light is not what's called for. And in this culture, we have a really hard time being with grief or sadness or rage or anger, like all of these full self-expressions of human emotion. We have a hard time with it because we have a hard time with our joy, right? Even with our joy, we're like, when's the other shoe gonna drop? Like, you can't even let yourself be fully present in joy because you're waiting for something quote unquote wrong to happen. And so when something quote unquote wrong does happen, instead of being happy that you got your self-fulfilling prophecy, you're like, oh, I just know it. FML, as people say. I'm not gonna, you know what that means, FML. You know what I mean? Yeah, you do. I'm not gonna say it because there are children here. And so when you drop the resistance and you accept where you are in the moment, like, this is what's happening. I am going through an addiction, or I am going through a divorce, or I just had a miscarriage, or so-and-so just died, or I didn't get this result, or I didn't get that result, and I am making it mean XYZ. See, there's a difference between I failed and I didn't get XYZ result and I am making it mean that I failed. It's different. You are articulating your authorship in your experience when you say, I am making it mean this thing. Because all that happened was somebody died, or you didn't get XYZ results, or you lost some money, or whatever the result is. That's the result. That's like the objective. Water is wet, rocks are hard. But you making it mean that it's failure, you making it mean that's rejection, you making it mean something else, that's the story you are creating based on your meaning making consciousness. Because can I just tell you, and you probably have this experience as well, that there have been times that when you were going through a particular thing, in the moment you thought this was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. It doesn't get worse than this. And then keep on living, as the elders say. And 6 months, a year, 10 years down the line, you're like, that's the best thing that ever happened to me. That was the pivot I didn't know I needed. Has that ever happened to you? Put a 1 in the chat if that has ever happened to you. That you thought that the worst thing ended up being actually the best thing. It was a blessing in disguise. And so you gotta drop the resistance first in order for it to not feel, in order for it to first, that doesn't have to last as long as it needs. You know what I'm saying? Like the resistance makes it last longer. It makes the medicine more bitter when you're resisting. And the second piece is the acceptance, right? So I gave you two right off the bat. Drop the resistance, embrace acceptance. And then the third piece of it is to, I'm always saying audit your assumptions, right? And so there's this assumption that life is supposed to just be smooth ride. And I don't know where you got that from. You have no evidence ever in life that it's supposed to be a smooth ride. If the mountain was smooth, you wouldn't be able to climb it. You'd fall right and you'd be like, you couldn't climb it if it was smooth. You have to have bridges to be able to hang on to something, to be able to slip and to break your fall and so forth. That's part of it. It's how it's designed. The journey is designed that way. And so if you were to change your assumption from it's supposed to be smooth and if it isn't, something's wrong, to whatever inconveniences, whatever delays, whatever failures, whatever mistakes I've made, those are also part of the journey. It's the sauce, it's the Goya that gives my journey some seasoning. So then if you can just be open to, what am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to get from this? What is this chiseling me to become? Because when you ask, for example, for patience, okay, you don't just automatically get knighted as this patient and just ever accepting person. You get stuff where you're going to have to exercise patience. You're going to get delays. How else are you going to exercise patience? When you want things right now and they don't come right now. That's how you exercise patience, right? So, be careful what you ask for because you're going to get it. You are the word of God in your own life. And so when you start to see that the things that you have asked for, you always get them. You may not be in charge of the how, but you are in charge of what you say. You do create what you do say. That is a universal law. And it's not like the thoughtless words that we throw around, although that has some influence in your results, but it's the stuff that you have with the dominant feeling, right? You're speaking, you are an already existing conversation, your way of being, the way you are in the world, how you treat people, how you treat yourself, how you speak to yourself. You are already existing conversation, as it were. And you know the existing conversation that you are by the results that you produce and the feelings that you generate inside of yourself from the results you produce. Okay, so you may already be an existing conversation of the shoe's gonna drop somehow. Don't get too excited because something's gonna bound to be wrong. And instead of when something goes wrong, you get happy that you're a self-fulfilling prophecy. Get curious about, well, if I can self-fulfill this prophecy, what other prophecy am I interested in fulfilling? Let's start saying something else. How about everything always works out for me, even when it doesn't look it? How about I always get what I want in the most elegant ways possible? And then you start getting curious. I always find money. I used to say this when I was little because I don't know about you, but in the Dominican Republic and other Caribbean countries, they don't do this whole allowance thing. What do you mean allowance? I brought you in this world and I give you a roof over your head. Be happy with that, right? And so we didn't get an allowance. So I used to want money for candy and for snacks and, playing the video games or whatever. So I always used to say, I didn't know that this is what I was doing, but I was affirming. I always find money. Everywhere I go, I find money. And so I would be like curious when I was walking down the street with my friends, I'd be looking at the sidewalk to see if I found like a dime here, a penny here, 5 cents, a quarter, whatever, or even $1, right? And so, but that was because I created that expectation. And I didn't know that that's what I was doing. But law, just like in the Bible says, it rains on the just and the unjust alike. The law is no respecter of persons. So you could be a 10-year-old child and exercise the law just like you could be a 56-year-old woman and exercise the law, right? And so when you are going through a dark night of the soul, when your faith is being challenged, when you are uncertain about the outcome, when you don't know if you can pull it off, I want you to hearken back to every single bad day that you have had heretofore, every single mistake, delay, or rejection that you have had heretofore, and ask yourself, was that the end of me? Was that my destruction? The fact that you can't even ask the question, the answer is already no, because you're here to tell the story, right? And so, if that was not the end of me, even when I thought it was, perhaps this one isn't either. And maybe that can create a clearing where you can get curious about what is the lesson that I'm here to get, and what is the contribution that I am here to be. I'll say that again. What is the lesson that I am here to get? And what is the contribution that I am here to be? Because sometimes you don't see what you're supposed to get. Well, then if I don't know what I'm supposed to get, maybe I'm supposed to give something, Lord, because I don't see it. And if you can be curious about that, right, then you can open up blessing that wouldn't have been available to you otherwise. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Are you tracking? Like, is there any amen in the house? Or if you can't say amen, say ouch, either way. Because here's the other thing. I remember a couple of weeks ago, if you were here, you remember, I don't remember who asked me this, but it was something about the New Orleans. There was some tragedy that happened in New Orleans, and she was heartbroken about it. She was pretty saddened about it, as we were all, because we share in the sadness that our neighbors share in. Same thing with the Los Angeles fires that are happening now. And you may have family or friends or relatives or colleagues in that area that are, managing their own tragedies in that way. And so you start to think, like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening now? I'm gonna invite you to ask those questions from a place of curiosity and not from a place of damnation or victimization. Because from a place of curiosity, you can actually get a useful, relevant answer. Soothing, even. When you ask it from a place of victimization, when you ask it from a place of despair, it's just rhetorical. It leaves you wanting more. It leaves you inconsolable. Do you say inconsolable or unconsolable? Somebody help me. English is not my first language. So
I think it's inconsolable.
Inconsolable, okay.
Inconsolable.
Porque en español es inconsolable. So I just was doing the whole transliteration thing.
Now I'm second guess.
There's also, I'm going to say something that perhaps will feel counterintuitive in the moment. I just invite you to be with it. And that is that it is okay to be inconsolable for a moment. There's a time for you to just be sad, but you to be angry, for you to be grief-stricken, heartbroken. That is part of our human experience. That is part of contrast as a teaching tool. When you can fully embrace, and we can take this lesson from watching children manage their emotions. If you ever watch a 3-year-old being full on tantrum, full on, The world is falling apart. I cannot believe you said no to me getting this toy. What am I going to do? How am I going to live the rest of my life? My world is shattered. Why did mom say I couldn't have this toy? And they just throw themselves on the floor, patalean, and they're kicking and screaming. And 3 minutes later, it's over. It's like a whole new world. They're laughing and playing with friends, et cetera, because they were fully in that tantrum. When it was time to have a tantrum, it was full on tantrum. And when the tantrum is over, now step left, new moment, choose, vote, do it. It's a new moment. And there's a lesson in that. There's a wisdom in that. One of the things that we do as adults is that we kind of like suppress it, like, not now. I can't cry now. I'm in the office. I can't do it now. The children are here. I can't do it now. I don't want them to think I don't have it together. And then you start leaking. So instead of letting yourself have that full experience, you start leaking. You become passive aggressive in your communication with your relatives, or you are impatient with people in the store or in traffic, or you start taking things personally that have nothing to do with you. But because the thing that did personally happen, you didn't address it, you didn't honor your own experience, then other stuff that has nothing to do with you, then you bleed on that, you leak on that. So I'm just going to invite you to let yourself, when you are having an experience, let yourself have the experience. Now, don't let the experience have you. There's a difference between you feeling your anger and your anger having you. That's when we become destructive. That's when we become, you start bleeding on other people, because like everybody's going to feel my wrath. Ain't nobody got to feel your wrath but you. The only reason why you don't let yourself feel your wrath and you want other people to feel your wrath is because you don't trust yourself to hold it. And so, if you could just be with your own experience. Right now, I'm having the experience of being absolutely grief stricken. And I want to be in the fetal position forever, or at least until further notice. If you can let yourself, as the poem If says, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting truth. There's another part that says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. Because we tend to give more credence to the positive events in our lives, and the negative events are like an inconvenience, like a glitch in the matrix. Like, I'm not supposed to have negative experiences. Well, how else would you know what positive
Wait,
experiences have? What'd you
wait,
say, Gio?
wait, that was beautiful. If you could, what is that saying? If you could meet triumphs and disasters because they're both a
The
delusion.
yeah, the that specific stanza in that poem says, if you can dream, if you can think and not make thoughts your master, if you can dream and not make dreams your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same.
And treat those two imposters just the same. That was beautiful, man. Can I
Thank
uh
you. Right.
can I write them down real quickly? I mean, I promise I can.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
don't make me have to recite the entire poem, because it is one of my favorite poems in the whole entire world. It's the poem
Okay, so what's the name of the poem?
If by Rudyard Kipling.
If by who?
Rudyard Kipling.
Kipling?
Kipling, Kipling. So the poem says, let me call it in. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good or talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, I switched them around. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it all in one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will that says to them, hold on. If you can walk, no, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose your common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Woo! That poem has brought me through many a dark night of the soul. Many a not dark night of the soul.
That's like to make my entire life around that poem. What a
Exactly.
beautiful poem. That was so incredible. This is wow.
Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. And it gives us such a remembrance that when we meet triumph, there is triumph in life, there is disaster in life. There is a time when you risk it all and you lose it all, but you can build it all once again. And you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to complain about it. You don't have to fall on the floor and have a tantrum about it. You really can do hard things. And I was sharing with a class last night. I was teaching a class of entrepreneurs, and I was saying, you were born, you were born not knowing how to do things. You were born into unfamiliar, uncertain territory. I mean, from the time that you were in your mother's womb, you were breathing placenta. And when you came earthside, you had to learn how to breathe completely different thing, oxygen. And if you didn't do it right away, they would bust you in your butt so you can like get with the program. It's time to breathe oxygen. And you didn't know how to hold the bottle, and you figured that out. You didn't know how to walk, you figured that out. You didn't know how to do language, you figured that out. You didn't know how to get stuff from the refrigerator, you figured that out. You didn't know how to take yourself to the bathroom, you figured that out. You didn't know how to read, you figured that out. You didn't know how to write, you figured that out. You didn't know how to make friends, you figured that out. Every single thing that you didn't know how to do, you were born not knowing and you figured it out. It's not a struggle for you to deal with unfamiliarity or uncertainty. You were designed that way. And so whenever the next dark night of the soul comes, just know this is your next initiation, and that you'll make it to the other side of that one, just like you've made it through the other side of every single bad day you've ever had and every single dark night of the soul that you've ever had. And you're like, well, at this point, we're going on a whole dark month of the soul. It's like, how many nights, Lord? You know what I mean? You might have to say that. And whatever it takes, however long it takes. The number 40 in the Bible is a metaphysical number that represents a complete but indefinite amount of time. So you see it in the fact that Moses started his ministry when he was 40, that Jesus spent 40 days in the desert, that they spent 40 days, 40 years in the desert when they were moving out of Pharaoh's land. And so that 40 isn't necessarily that it was 40 years or 40 days. It's that it's a complete but indefinite amount of time. It takes as long as it takes. That's what that number means. And the way, if you're interested in making it last only as long as it needs to last and not a moment longer, then insert your acceptance, drop your resistance, and get curious. Why now? Why me? What am I supposed to get? And what am I supposed to give in this situation? Because you don't want to go through a dark night of the soul for no reason, right? Like, can we make it useful and relevant? Lord, if we're going to go through this, let's make something out of it. Yeah. Who has questions or comments or what you think of the poem? I didn't know we were going to be reciting poems today, Lord, but here we are. Who's got something?
Well, I'm really loving today's conversation, but I was here late, so I don't know the context in which it's in. What is the context in which it's in?
So the question was, how do you get through a dark night of the soul? And I said, I have three answers for that. One is drop the resistance. Two is accept where you are. And three, get curious about what are you supposed to get and what are you supposed to give in this instance.
I feel so moved and emotional today in the context of this conversation, but I didn't enter the call with that. I didn't enter
Mhm.
emotional. No, I entered like an animal, you know? Like I'm a man and I spit and I curse. And now I'm all emotional and tell me the three things again. It's um
Drop the resistance,
drop the resistance.
accept where you are, and get curious about what you're supposed to get and what you're supposed to give in this moment.
And this is and get curious about what you are supposed to get and to give. And the question is very poetic, which is how do you
Yeah, how do you
pass
get
through
through a dark night of the soul?
a dark night of the soul? That is so poetic. How do you get through a dark night of the soul? Accept what you are. Get curious about where you are. No, drop the resistance. Accept what you are and get curious about what you're supposed to get and to give.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean that's some like monk stuff. Like that's enlightenment kind of thinking.
Well, I am in the middle of a fast, so it's to be expected. January topics are always deep with me.
It's just beautiful. You know, one of the things that I have that I'm present right now in those dark nights of the soul that I've had and uh, is that I ask myself why, there's this two worlds that kind of show up in those dark nights of the soul. There's the one of why is this happening right now?
Hmm.
Why do I need to go through this? Why is this useful for me? Like how does this what is this telling me? What is this demanding of me to see? So
Yeah.
I see it in the question of curiosity.
Yes.
And it's so hard to ask those questions in the middle of the storm
Hmm.
without being victim of it. It's like you can't be a victim. You gotta really curiously ask, what am I supposed to what is this pain revealing? What am I attached to here?
Yes.
It's tough in the middle of the storm.
Yes.
Right now, it's super cool. Like
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a contemplative philosophical exercise right now. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
It's, mhm.
while going through it, the dark nights of the soul reveal my attachment, my undistinguished attachments about the possibility that my life is. And that's some difficult things to swallow sometimes.
Well, difficult, but when you throw them up against the wall of your own expectations. But if we just drop the resistance and start getting acceptance and curious, then it's like, oh, this is what is, right?
Yeah, it's just that in the middle of the storm,
Yeah, yeah, right.
oh, this is what is. It's like, whoa, I don't want this. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But also just being okay with it, right? So it's like, because sometimes, especially the clever folks, especially the super intelligent, super brilliant, super metaphysical, spiritual, like kumbaya, love and light people, sometimes we resist our resistance too, right? There's like, I'm not supposed to feel that way. I'm supposed to be better than this. I'm supposed to know what this is. And I'm supposed to just love and light it, blah, 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 blah. And we resist the fact that we're mad or angry or sad or worried or, our faith has been shaken or that you're being petty, or that you're being a child, or that you're throwing a tantrum because you're supposed to be above that, and da da da. If you could just accept that this is where I am right now, if you could just be in your anger instead of being drowned by it, like swim in it instead of drowning in it, there's a difference, right? Because you can
The
have your anger without your anger having you.
the challenge inside of the in the possibility, right, that you're pointing to is if the person is cold, if the person is hungry, if the person is without shelter, and the person is alone. It's like, wow, those conditions are happening. You're cold, you got no shelter, and you're hungry, and you're alone, and you're asking yourself, oh, what is this revealing? The conditions make it so real, really difficult to be strong in mind. Liz, who's on this call, one time said something to me that never left me. I had just hired her.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the beginning of our relationship. And I was learning how to be a leader of a team,
Mm-hmm.
right? A team leader, right? And I was kind of demanding stuff, and demanding uh, her to reinvent herself as quickly as possible. And Liz is a genius, right? So she says, in she gives it back to me in a philosophical way. She says, it's very difficult to be enlightened if you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, let's go to lunch then. But then I got, I got my entire life in some way in that phrase
Yes.
that I'm really speaking for myself,
Yes.
that I judge human beings for not being enlightened enough when they're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And man, the conditions make it really difficult. So anyway, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Thank you for the generosity of thinking out loud with you.
You're welcome. And I think it's very interesting that you started your commentary saying that you came in here without the context of the question, and that you came in here like an animal. Remember you said that?
Yeah, I'm ready to curse and spit.
Yes. Well, we all start that way. And to your point of like the being hungry or being cold or shelterless or whatever, you're right. We are not available for the higher parts until we handle the lower parts, survival and physical and emotional and mental peace and comfort and so forth. And so this is where we give ourselves grace, that it's like, handle those things are not beneath you. They're the prerequisites for you to be available in your heart. That's why in the Bible it says, nobody comes to the Father except through me. And so you're not available in your heart Christ consciousness until you've handled the lower levels. So the animal instinct, the need to survive, has to be handled in order for you to be able to ask those, why is this happening to me? And what's the spiritual lesson? And da, da, da. Man, can I just say, excuse my French, we're all adults here, but F a spiritual lesson until I got some food in my belly. I don't know what it is. The lesson right now is spaghetti. Can I get some food? Right? And
Yeah.
so when you can, this is one of the reasons why I keep saying, and thank you everybody for staying past our time. This is one of the reasons why I keep saying, your humanity doesn't exempt you from your divinity, and your divinity does not exempt you from your humanity. You are both. And so, in as much as you are part animal, part divine, then you got to handle it. Be bilingual, the sacred and the profane. Yeah. ¿Qué pasó? Another mind blown moment, Giovanni?
I just love the poetic way in which you said it. Humanity doesn't exempt you from your divinity, and your divinity doesn't exempt you from your humanity. I used to say it this way. Now I'm going to say it your way, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to quote you, I promise. I'm going to
Okay.
give you credit.
Okay.
But I used to say it this way. No one transcends their humanity.
Right.
No one does. You say it that way, but I love this poetic way about divinity. It's just so great.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So thank you everybody for being here. I really, really do appreciate you. I appreciate you being willing to be in the question, um, and let your life be the answer to that question. How do you get through the dark night, a dark night of the soul? Keep on living, right? Drop the resistance, embrace your acceptance, and get curious. Why here? Why now? Why me? What am I supposed to get? What am I supposed to give? Jay says, I needed this so much. The huddle continues to water my soul. Yes, yes, yes. I love it. So remember, everybody, to keep on living, keep on loving, be generous with your energy, time, attention, laugh loudly, obnoxiously. Lord knows there are plenty of people crying obnoxiously. Let's bring some joy into the world. Um, Sleep at least 7 or 8 hours, 9 if you're like me. Exercise. Remember that twerking is a Kundalini raising exercise. Eat more plant-based, stress less, and of course, audit your assumptions. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. We love you. See you next time.